I was speaking of Tarantino. He talks about how he used his training as an actor to write dialogue, and he figures out what must happen in the scene, and then he lets the characters digress and go where they want to go. And that's where it gets funny and interesting in his dialogue.
Welcome, everybody, to Let's Write Scripts. I'm Micah Cratty. I'm the head of writing at Arc Studio, what I think is the best screenwriting app in the world. And if you want to check it out, there's a link in the description below. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Brent Forrester. Brent has written for some of my favorite shows like The Simpsons and The Office. Brent, I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I always get so much out of connecting with my fellow writers. Nobody knows what we go through except for us, and I never tire of suffering with you.
Fantastic. And speaking of suffering, Brent's coming to us live from the set of Severance, as he noted earlier. So we're just getting mad cubicle vibes today. Brent, as our guest, do you want to start off? What do you think goes into a good character intro?
I think that when you're talking about character, you're talking about the most important thing in writing. And the most important insight I've had into character, probably contradiction in complexity, or what actors like. So, if you have contradictions, Tony Soprano is a killer, but he's in therapy. He's sensitive. Already we're in, right? Just that contradiction. So if you have something like that, that's grabby.
I love that. And I love what you're doing there, because you're just trying to define the character so quickly in the audience's mind. One way that I like to do that is show them oftentimes just like solving a problem or dealing with some obstacle or difficulty in some way, because it's
Great.
just like the way people deal with problems shows so much about who they are and just like, what's their deal? Like, I feel like you just want people to know, like, what's this character's deal? And if you show them trying to solve a problem or deal with some sort of obstacle, then you're going to really show who they are. I also feel like you don't have to worry so much about like super descriptions about like what they look like and stuff like that when you meet them, unless those are relevant details to the character. You know, if they're 7 feet tall, then like, yeah, you want to have a little detail in there about that. But for me, it's more about like the essence and the vibe of the character rather than I don't know, every detail of their physical appearance.
I agree. I agree. I think those are super wise, both things you said. Action, can we see who this character is by the choices and decisions they make? That's brilliant, bro. And I agree. I don't like to read stage directions very much. So I like them to be real short. I like to see the dialogue. And I agree.
All right. So Nisi's asking, well, I don't write comedy specifically. I do love to add comedy into my writing. Do you think it's better to dive into a course like yours or do something more focused, improv, another practice? How do you
Mhm.
learn, as someone who's a non-comedy writer, to put some comedy in the scripts?
Great question. I love the improv idea. I mean, the best training for comedy dialogue writers is improv, because when we're writing comedy dialogue, we generally are kind of getting into character, saying what the character would say, and then writing it down. So I think that's great. And it's fun. It's so fun. Tina Fey says that there's people wandering around the streets of New York looking for their improv fix. That's how addictive improv is. It's super fun, super social. It's great for your life. Yes, yes, yes. I love all of that. If you want to learn to write a pilot, that's what I've been teaching, pilot class, but I've also been doing a 2-day seminar just on jokes and comedy. And that one came from my analysis of comedy. So the other thing you can do is just watch comedy, half hour sitcom or whatever, you can watch a stand-up comedian too if you want. When something legitimately makes you laugh, write it down exactly as they said it, and then be a little analyst and try to pick it apart. Just ask yourself, why did I laugh at that? You will find a lot of structural stuff. You will always have insights if you just try analyzing comedy. That is how I taught myself to do it. I was not a funny person ever in my life. I became a professional comedy writer. You can do it just through analysis. Living proof.
Yeah, and I would also say it's like you don't have to be a comedy writer to write comedy. I mean, it's so important in dramas as well. Like, one of the reasons like some of the biggest dramas in recent memory, like, Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, were so huge is because they were really funny. They were necessarily like, there were some jokes in it, but just like situational humor coming out of the situation, like that the characters were in, and like being true to the natures and sort of like the flaws in humanity is like so important, for dramatic scripts as well. So I would encourage drama writers to not also shy away from comedy because like if it's just all darkness, then like that's just very bleak, and like you need the light in order, just to see the.
Totally agree, man. And if you look at Tarantino, for example, nobody's saying like Tarantino's stuff is comedy. And yet, so much of it is, right? The dialogue within these dark and violent scenarios is funny. So, totally agree.
What's the best way to bring out form of comedy in words? I guess that's saying through dialogue. Specific things. I mean, like one thing that just pops in my mind is it's kind of what I mentioned earlier is like being true to the situation that the characters are in, like looking at the scenario instead of trying to force a joke in when nothing funny. Like oftentimes comedy happens, like there is an opportunity for a joke because of the situation. That's why it's a situational comedy, right? Like that the characters are in.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you're into some heavy stuff there. Okay, so something I learned from my friend Judd Apatow, a self-taught genius of comedy. He loves the comedy of behavior over the comedy of banter. And it's literally a phrase that I wrote down hanging out with Judd, behavior over banter. What is funny behavior? Well, funny behavior, lying is always funny. Hiding things about yourself is always funny, always funny. Trying to be something you're not is always funny. Those are behavioral comedy. And if you come from fiction writing, where I came from, you can be word obsessed. Behavior is funnier than language.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. It's like obviously with The Office, like Michael Scott pops up perfectly. I feel like in the behavioral sense of like what he wants to be, what he imagines himself being versus his reality in his life.
Yes. Well, now you're getting it at the essence of character comedy. So I feel like my great contribution as an analyst of comedy is what I call the core comics contradiction. Okay. Most comic characters have a core contradiction. They're pretending to be one thing, but we see them as the opposite. So the eureka moment for me was Austin Powers. Okay. Trying to come across sexy, baby, right? But with the big teeth and the hair, the glasses, he's coming across repulsive. That's the contradiction. With Michael Scott, he's projecting the fact that he's popular, funny, clever, right? But he's the opposite, unpopular, not funny, and dumb. Boom. That's it.
And then you can go on for so like I mean, how many amazing scenes and episodes can you get just from that? Like it's just a never ending thing. And I think that's what the trick is, especially when you're getting into pilot writing, right? Is that you're trying to create a core, like a story engine in some senses, right? That is going to keep doing things over. So when you have that thing like a fundamental conflict, a fundamental disconnect, it's not a one-time joke. It's not a problem that like he's going to solve once and then it's over. It's just going to keep happening again and again and again and again. So you can get 100 episodes out of it. I'm writing a TV series comedy and I'm needing help with the breakdown of the framework of the script, like 2 to 3 acts kind of a thing. Brent, how do you approach story structure in comedies?
Okay. Great question. The simple answer for you guys always is remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been invented. When in doubt, just watch an episode of whatever your show is most like. Okay, so if you're writing a workplace comedy and it's, oh, it's kind of like, Parks and Rec, just watch the pilot of Parks and Rec. Write down every scene that happened, and you'll now know how many scenes are in a pilot. And the act breaks come right before the commercial. Okay, so if you're watching on streaming, you may have to kind of intuit that there was probably a commercial there, but you can feel it. TV structure is usually 3 acts in comedy. Okay, and you can always tell the commercial comes after the act break. So it's a 3 act structure. If you want to get a little more complex, they've added now cold open at the beginning and tag at the end. So it's 3 acts in the middle with a little comedy scene at the beginning and the end. That allows 2 more commercials, by the way, which is why they do it. So it's 3 act structure, cold open tag, analyze existing shows, and analyze 2 shows. You become an expert on structure. Trust me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's why it's also the lost art of the spec script, which is something that like when I was starting out, it was still a thing that people were doing, which is basically spec script can mean a lot of different things in the industry, but in television, it means writing a sample episode of an existing show. So I spec'd The Office. That was one of the first. That was the first script I ever wrote was a spec of The Office, where I
Nice.
had Michael and Dwight doing a police ride along, and Michael had left a DVD copy of his will, a video will behind at the office in case he died on the ride along. And so the office mates were like trying to debate about like whether to, watch this thing or not, which
Great.
obviously they do.
That's
And then they
great.
go, "Oh, great." And it was like, that's how I was learning structure, and that's how I was learning voice and to write for
Nice.
a character and all those kind of things. So it used to be back in the day, you could use that as a sample to actually get a job. Now
Sure.
I feel like it's more a learning tool, and some TV fellowships maybe still allow those. But I don't know. I think that's still a great way to learn structure and,
Right.
how to write.
I hear what you're saying. Most people write their own original pilots now, but I think if you were trying to get a job from a showrunner who's looking at your writing samples, spec of an existing show, a lot of people think it's better because that's what the showrunner is hiring you to do, is imitate an existing show. So
When
don't
you
count it out as a writing sample, people.
I mean, you've been a showrunner, right? Like, have you read specs as writing samples, or has it been all original pilots in
God, I
modern
mean,
times recently?
what's funny is it really changed. It used to be everything was a spec of an existing show. And then I feel like around 2000, the year 2000, I don't know, it was a slow progression. And people started submitting original pilots, but I always thought it was because that's a form of novelty. Like we had all read every freaking spec Seinfeld in the world. Now here comes a thing called Russian Submarine. What's Russian Submarine? This seems great. The guys who wrote Russian Submarine got staffed that year. And so people started to do it. But I noticed that also writers more often when they go, "Oh, I want to write a show," it's because of some world they've observed or something in their own family or in their own lives. And so they want to write original pilots more, which is great, but it's harder because with an existing show, the characters have already been created, the dynamics have already been explored, and you're just imitating something that already works. It's much easier.
Some comedy just don't read funny on the page. Even Woody Allen's brilliant early scripts don't feel special until you hear his delivery or an actor bringing the dialogue to life. Is this a problem you've encountered? How do you win over skeptical producers or write your way out of this problem?
I think trust yourself. If you're writing, good, funny dialogue, it comes across funny on the page. It is true that good actors will 10x, the quality of your material when they do it live. But you can trust there's such a thing as a funny script, funny characters and funny situations, things that are observational where you go, oh God, I've been through that, I've done that, that's me. Human hypocrisy, if you have the courage to look at your own self contradictions or lampoon other people's hypocrisy, it generally is funny on the page. So trust yourself. Now, you can also make stuff, write a funny sketch and shoot it on your phone, get funny actors, and you will prove that your material that is funny when you put a couple funny actors in it and shoot it on your phone. Don't worry about production values, people. We don't care if it looks gritty and like you shot it on your phone. If it looks like you shot it on your phone, we go, wow, authentic. Well done, artist. Have something to
Gritty.
say. Trust yourself. Make stuff. Go get them, artist. I like that question.
How do you balance making a character funny without losing their emotional depth? And how do you know when a joke or comedic beat is dragging too long? Let's do the first one first. How do you make a character funny without like kind of losing the reality and the emotional depth of them, where they're not just a joke?
Mhm. Ideally, those go together. The paradox of working with talented comedy writers is they arrive at this truth over and over again. The more serious it is, the funnier it's going to be. The more emotionally painful it is, typically, the funnier it's going to be. And my first mentor in comedy was Susan Harris, who created the Golden Girls. She's a self-taught genius of comedy. Nobody taught her this, and she was my first mentor. She said to me, Brent, write about what is difficult for you, even painful, and trust that it will come out funny. So orient yourself towards emotional depth and your comedy will work better. How do you know when a joke or comedic beat is dragging too long? I mean, there is a trial and error element to this craft. You try it out. Go look at this clip from Taxi on YouTube. It's Reverend Jim Yellow Light. What he do, it's a character of Reverend Jim. He's at a DMV taking a test, a driver's test. He's a kind of an eccentric character. And the whole joke is him calling to his friends because he needs to cheat on the test. And he says, what do you do at a yellow light? And they say, slow down. And he goes,
What? Yellow light beam.
it was so funny to the audience that they added one more instantiation of the same joke. Okay, so that just goes to show sometimes you don't know.
How do you make strong personalities that do not overpower each other for 6 main characters? So she's got 6 main characters and she wants all of them to be like strong, great characters, but like how do you make them actually complement each other instead of all just butting up against each other and sort of kind of stealing, eating up the oxygen?
I love this question,
Yeah.
Ryan, because it suggests that you're good with character. This is a very good problem to have. You got so many cool characters that are like, fighting each other for stage time. Great. I don't really want to restrain you at all with your characters, frankly. But I would say to everybody who's listening, when I go to create a pilot, I think one great character. If I can have one great character, that sometimes is all you need. Better than one is one and the second one, and they have a relationship, especially if it's a push-pull relationship. Look at Hacks. Why that show is instantly good is because it's 2 characters, different ages. One's hip, one's washed up. They don't like each other. They clash, but they need each other. And at some core level, they kind of are each other. After that, if you're doing a pilot, maybe you need 6 characters. Oh my God, do they all got to be complex? No, actually. After the first 2, I let any writer off the hook and say your next 4, and 6 is as many as you need. 5 is plenty. 6 is great. Your characters that are after your main 2 can largely be stock characters with a twist. That's in a pilot about as much as the audience can really perceive anyway. What do I mean by stock characters with a twist? All right, there was an executive, he bought the show Pretty Little Liars, and he told me that it was a great pitch. I said, why? He goes, oh, the characters. Okay, why? What was the character? He said, okay, first character. The author, she pitches, it's a goody two-shoes, a woman who is always on time, great at her job, always an A student, teacher's pet, but she's cheating on her marriage with her sister's husband. Okay. I was like, this sounds really interesting. He goes, yeah, we bought the pilot. What is it? It's just a stock character, the goody two shoes with a contradiction. She is not so good, right? Not so perfect. So that's what I mean by stock with a contradiction. You could do that on your secondary characters for sure.
Yeah, and it's also it's like I think we were kind of talking about the character. This ties with the character intros that we were starting off with, where it's just like what's their deal, especially for 6. It's like people can't hold that much information in their mind, so it's just they want to know like, oh right, that's this one, like that's like think about Friends and stuff, right? Like, and you can over time add nuance definitely to it, over the seasons, but you're also like generally it's 1 or 2 characters story at a time, even in an ensemble. Like it's not going to be like this is this character's episode. This is this character's episode. You'll have an A story, a B story, but like all 6 characters aren't also going to have like I was, I'm watching The Residence right now, that murder mystery show that's on Netflix, the new Shondaland one. And it's like, in different episodes, you're kind of focusing on, it's a huge ensemble. They have so many characters, but like, they don't equally focus on all of them during the episodes. It's like, this episode, you're looking more at this character. I think like murder shows are great for that because it's like the red herring. It's like, okay, this episode, we think it's about this character. This one, it's this character. But it's not all the characters all the time.
Absolutely correct. You're totally right. As it turns out, in any episode of half-hour TV, for sure, you typically have an A story and a B story. A story involves 2 characters that a clash. B story, the same. So now you've taken care of 4 characters. At The Office, we had 18 characters at one point, and we had to do C stories just to include more actors. But even so, that's 6 characters. A story is usually about 2 characters in conflict. So A, B, C story, you've really taken care of 6, and everybody else is just coming in for a line or 2. But yeah, it's a story, a single story is usually 2 characters, and in a clash that escalates and resolves.
Pamela's wondering, what is the trend in scripts at the moment? Is there a type of story or genre that producers are seeking currently? Brent, I always feel like this is a dangerous question, for a dangerous path for writers to go down. What do you think about this?
Agree. I want you writing about what matters to you. And if you have something to say, we always love that. Okay. That's what we love in the arts. If you're struggling with things and trying to express it, we will feel that. So, orient yourself towards your instincts about what you want to write about. Having said that, I will share at least one potentially dangerous piece of info that I've been getting from the buyers in comedy. Okay, we had a trend for a while in what you might call hard identity comedy. That's what the buyers are calling it somewhat critically now. But it's all the comedies you love, like Girls, Insecure, the comedies that are centered on typically the main actor and her struggles as a human being, frequently very autobiographical. Um, those shows are what the performers most want to do, and writers, we love doing those. But the buyers turned on that a little bit, and now they feel that it's too niche, and what they want, of course, is four quadrant entertainment. That means men, women, young, old. That's what four quadrant means. So, material for everybody. And they're talking a lot, at least in comedy, about a return to hard comedy. So yeah, I feel it's dangerous to even speak about, because it seems like we might be encouraging you to imitate. And in fact, staying authentic is a better move for you. Anyway, maybe you take it with a grain of salt. Can you write classic four quadrant comedy and still be authentic? That may be your best move.
How do you find a good balance between adding humor and furthering the plot?
Great question. I mean, only a writer could ask that question, right?
You got a great,
Vote as a writer,
great
we need to
audience
understand
here.
that.
These are wonderful. Alexa, yeah.
How do you find a good balance between these two? Okay, I think that the method for writing comedy for me is, you get to your outline stage by talking about your story, figuring it out, put it on your little cards, getting your structure. But when you get to outline stage, what you're basically doing is writing down what must happen in each scene. And some of that is what must happen to move the plot forward. What exposition do we need? What does somebody need to do here to move the plot forward? Okay, so your outline is telling you what has to happen in the scene. But when you go to write that scene, you look at what has to happen, and you're going to get there, but you're going to allow the characters to be a little digressive. I was speaking of Tarantino. See if you can find his interview with Charlie Rose. He talks about how he used his training as an actor to write dialogue. And he figures out what must happen in the scene, and then he lets the characters digress and go where they want to go. And that's where it gets funny and interesting in his dialogue. So that's what you can do. Know what you must do, and then allow the characters to digress. Be a little playful in there, and then see what you get.
I think it's also there's a common ground, those aren't necessarily always mutually exclusive. And like in the Venn diagram of humor and furthering the plot, I think you'll find conflict in the middle of it. So if you're having conflict in your scenes, that is going to be fuel for both moving your story forward and giving you opportunities for humor. This is a question from Zen Zone. Learned so much from watching movies like Meet the Parents, which is mostly awkward humor. How do you know whether to write jokes or situational humor? So we're getting down deep into comedy taxonomy.
This is so good. Well, I love that you're referencing Meet the Parents. That's a really classic comedy, and for the reasons you're pointing out, it's situational. It's also kind of observational. I remember talking to the director of Meet the Parents, who said he thought of it as an anxiety dream, right? Like, oh, what's going to happen if the parents don't like me? Exaggerated into a comedy. It's great. It is behavioral. It is situational. And that's always the best kind of comedy. Observational, situational, behavioral, as opposed to writing jokes, which is more mechanical, more verbal tricks, right? Great. But the situational will always beat the joke writing. Joke writing is something we do, and we do even with a situational comedy like Meet the Parents. The writer is going to go back over it, hopefully with a couple other writers. We love to write comedy in groups, and we will punch it up. And what does that mean? That's largely a matter of increasing the sharpness of moments, making them quicker and tighter, making them more specific. And that can be a language issue as well. Specific language is always funnier than more general language. So there is something to the mechanics of joke writing for sure. But yes, when in doubt, go with situations that provoke funny behavior.
I think it's also in Meet the Parents specifically. I was thinking of an example of this where in comedy, there's a difference between something being funny and it inducing a laugh. Like oftentimes in situational humor, there will be a situation that you're kind of the tension is there and you're just waiting for the release of it. And that's where the joke comes in. So for instance, in Meet the Parents, where Ben Stiller's talking about milking the cat, that's such an absurd thing. And he's just got himself down this situation where he just can't go backwards. He just has to keep committing to this thing. And it's funny, but like you're not really laughing. You're just like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And then when Robert De Niro says,
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
that is the release for all this tension that you've been building throughout the situation. So it's like it works hand in hand where the situation could build the humor, and then the joke releases that tension in laughter.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very you got some good comedy science there, my friend.
Ooh, fun. Thank you. That's high praise. I sometimes get feedback about why now? Why today? What makes this script need to occur right now? How do you tackle this? Especially when the stakes or call to action might not be world ending.
Oh, I feel so defensive of you, Matt. I want to defend you here because I feel like this is a note that like all the executives have learned to give now. It's like in their little playbook. Oh, but why now? And it's like, okay, you sound really smart. And honestly, I think that's why they do it. Is like they're nervous. They're supposed to be giving you good notes, and it doesn't always apply. I mean, come on. I don't know why now. I don't want to be so bitter and rejecting of this concept. It is good to have an instinct for the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. So maybe that's a why now. But I think you can trust yourself. Trust your instincts and your emotions and your feeling of like this has to be said. That characteristic is what I have seen in successful artists in my life. The people who have strong opinions seem to be good at making art and comedy. I'm thinking of Mindy Kaling and Bob Odenkirk. Okay, to take two different generations that I worked with, both had very strong opinions about stuff, and that for some reason is what I want to say when you have been browbeaten by telling somebody saying why now, why today. Like I don't know. It's just this is great. That's why. Shut up.
I think there's also a strategy where it's really helpful to keep in mind that like going broad is actually not universal. Like the personal is universal. So if in the why now, I think it's always a good idea instead of looking big to look internally. Like what's the emotional thing that this is about? And you'll probably find that emotional thing is not unique to you. Lots of people in the world, no matter what decade it is, are probably going to connect with that thing. So you don't necessarily have to be like, well, the political scenario or the this or the that, or like, or, with, whatever the big thing is, like, you can just sort of be like, well, this is about heartbreak. This is about grief. This is about whatever. And like, that is going to be a universal thing that like, there's always a why now for a deeply felt emotion, I think. So
I think
you can
that's
always
well
turn
said.
inward. You can always turn inward instead of having to look.
I think that's great advice, Matt. I know that people are getting this note in relation to their plots. Like, why does the pilot happen now? So there may be something to it.
Brent, have you found what is considered funny different than from years ago? I feel like this is also a dangerous question.
Oh, it's good. It's good. This is a good one, because the truth is a lot of comedy, most comedy does not age well. Like most of it doesn't. And so I'm always astonished when I see stuff and it's like, it's still good. And some of it is like, I just watched Charlie Chaplin in a movie called City Lights. And the opening sequence of City Lights is still freaking funny. It's Chaplin who played this little tramp character. Basically, Chaplin, the joke of Chaplin's character is he's a tramp, a homeless guy, who is always trying to act as if he absolutely belongs, yes, in high society. And a lot of tipping of the hat, this guy, and the character still works. The opening set piece, he's asleep on a statue that he didn't realize is being unveiled. They take this tarp off the thing, and he wakes up there, and there's a huge crowd looking at him. And as he tries to react as if he's, everything's fine here, it's still funny. And it is a contradiction between trying to come across one way and coming across another. Trying to act like everything's fine and I'm a dignified individual while his pants are caught on like the sword of the statue. And It's 120 years old and it's still funny.
Brent, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I had a great time. This was
Yeah,
awesome.
me too.
So
Me
great
too.
to get your wisdom here. Brent, any final words, any parting wisdom or encouragement or advice for the people who've come to write today?
Yeah, being a writer of any kind is unique and challenging. We do it, you and me and our host here, because all of us have glimpsed some talent in ourselves. We have a gift for it, or we wouldn't be doing it. So, trust that gift and trust that all of the hard things that you experience as a writer are experienced by all other writers. And somehow we have to get more solace in um sharing the hard experiences of writing as well as the wins.